All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. Happy Thursday, everybody. Hope all of you guys are having a great week. We have a very special guest today. After the Clippers dropped 6 consecutive games post James Harden trade, they have recently ripped off 10 of their last 13, including a bunch of really impressive wins. And we are bringing on Law Murray, a friend of mine who covers the Clippers for The Athletic and also shares the distinction of being the first guest on Hoops Tonight who I have played and won multiple basketball games with, which is very cool. Well, how's it going, man?
It's good to see you too, man. I'm glad that we're getting a chance to do this. Shout out to my guy Jovan, because I know you've been doing a lot with him and the crazy team he's got over there. So I'm privileged to be in this space.
Yeah, the Clippers and Lakers have definitely been heavy on the entertainment this year. So obviously, turning point of the season, the Clippers send out their forward depth, albeit aging forward depth in Nick Batum and Marcus Morris, and in getting James Harden in return, really struggled to start, especially on the offensive end, especially on the glass. But they've rounded some things out. They've won 10 of their last 13. I just want you to start by just telling us, from 30,000 feet, how you felt about the Harden trade in general and what it's done for
I was so neutral about the whole situation because I was on it from almost the jump. Like when James opted into his contract, it was shortly after that, I got word that James is trying to come to the Clippers. Like he's talking to guys about getting to the Clippers. And my mind went, James would be great on the Clippers. Like the Clippers had just let Eric Gordon go. So I knew that where there's some smoke, there's some fire. Eric Gordon was a player that the organization really liked from the front office standpoint. And Tyronn Lue had a big role for Eric Gordon. He had him start when Paul George's knee buckled the wrong damn way against the Oklahoma City Thunder in March. And even before that, when Marcus Morris was out for a Northern California trip, it was Eric who got to be the starter in his place. And I just thought that was interesting because Eric is obviously not as big as Marcus Morris is. He's a stout player, but he's not, he doesn't have those forward dimensions, at least the big forward dimensions, because Eric was starting at the 3 when he was with Houston last year before the trade. And so I thought from a basketball standpoint in a vacuum, it was going to be like, okay, I can see how he fits. He's a big guard. The organization likes big guards, the 1-2 type of guards. And then you look at defensively, I know Damian Lillard's name was out there, but I was like, if I'm the Clippers, I'd be preferring to get James because James is bigger and a guy who playing with Kawhi and Paul, you can do more defensively. And that might seem surprising to people who love to attach themselves to narratives about how well a player fits a defense. But I felt like James Harden could fit the Clippers defense better than Damian Lillard would. In hindsight, looking at the Milwaukee Bucks defense, you can see where I might be getting at with that. On the other hand, there's a reason James was available. There's a reason James has the narrative that follows him from place to place. And then you're wondering, okay, so how is he going to handle adversity? Because there will be adversity. There's already adversity with the Clippers because they're feeling the heat of wasting years of the era of Paul and Kawhi being on that team. Like when they got there, they were young-ish and ready to ascend, but now they're at the end of their second contracts, respectively, with the team. How does a guy who is angling to get out because of his contract situation fit into all that? What does that do for Russell Westbrook? Because Russell Westbrook, the only reason he got to the Clippers is because the Clippers donated all their point guards at the trade deadline, and Paul George loudly and Kawhi Leonard less loudly, but still prominently suggested that the team needed to get another damn point guard. And Russ showed that he was a much better fit with the Clippers than he was with the Lakers. So you bring in a guy like James Harden, and we all know there was going to be some conflict there. How was that going to go? It took 4 months for this trade to complete. I thought the trade could have been done as early as late June. It took until the last day of October for terms to be finalized. And then because of all that, James is late. He's a month behind everybody else. This team came out of training camp trying to be a Russell Westbrook offense. Tyronn Lue said, we're going to run, we're going to cut, and we're going to defend at a top 5 level. And you could see how that was going to make sense, especially when your main fours are Robert Covington and Nicholas Batum. And so James coming there disrupted all that, and they try to have it both ways. And that's when I was like, you're seeing the downsides of this trade immediately. But now you're seeing the upside now that they've won 10 of the last 13. And yes, it does coincide with picking James Harden as the main point guard and deciding Russ had to be in the second unit.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you brought that up about the not getting the deal done over the summer, which there's a bunch of different factors there, not the least of which was James was being an antagonist with the Sixers as well, which is going to throw a wrench into things. But like when you lose out on training camp and you don't get a chance to establish those things, it makes it so that you're basically working through those issues during the season. And specifically the point you made about Russ, because like that's the thing is like Russ fit in super well with the Clippers versus the Lakers because they desperately needed what he brought to the table, as opposed to Russ being a redundancy with the Lakers. And so bringing that pace, but the gist of it foundationally, though, is having a guy that can get Kawhi and Paul George in their spots, basically set the table for them so that they're operating more in an advantage situation. Like it's crazy watching the Clippers now with Russ and James Harden, just how often Paul George is working with an advantage versus as the guy who's initially breaking down the defense, right? But when you shift to James Harden, it's the same kind of style from the standpoint of him setting the table, but a much more methodical, slower approach. And the Clippers have been a much slower paced team after the trade. That said, they've done a nice job, I think, in the minutes where Russ comes in, the way they're staggering it, of kind of shifting gears and playing faster when Russ is on the floor. So now zooming in on Harden specifically as a basketball player, how have you liked his fit offensively alongside James Harden and alongside Paul George and Kawhi Leonard?
I think the fit needed to be established after they had 2 point guards in the starting lineup. When James got there, T. Lue wanted to keep Russ as the main point guard and have James be off the ball. It's just too many cooks, too many touches that needed to be figured out. And the thing with Paul George is that Paul is at his best when he knows he's got to be that guy, when he's not trying to quote unquote glue guy. Like we saw him in Dallas, like, say, I'm going to defend and not score. And it's like, bro, that's not going to work, man. And so Kawhi is another one where it's like, Kawhi is a guy who he has his rhythm. He likes to get the ball. He likes to survey and pick and choose how he's going to attack you. But those dudes had to go through hard lessons and adjust what they're doing. And obviously the team had to go through the hard lesson of James has to be the point and Russ has to be the second point guard. And that has streamlined everything because Kawhi is on a heater right now. And a lot of it started in Sacramento when we were up there 2 weeks ago. And it was just Kawhi, we realize that you like to get to your spot, take 5 seconds, understand what you want to do. How about you just go? It was like when I was hooping with you, I was like, yo, you got an advantage. You 6'6", bro. Just I can bring it up. But when I get it to you, just get into your work. And that's been great for Kawhi because James understands where Kawhi is going to have the ball. One reason why Kawhi is holding up so well, playing all these games, something that we haven't seen since he was in San Antonio. He's not the point guard. He's not the guy who's got to run every pick and roll, get everything, get double teamed, and still have to figure stuff out. Nah, like you got James Harden who can take on. It's like when you're a running back. Instead of having a workhorse, you have a running back by committee kind of thing. It's the same thing here. You got different guys who can handle the pick and roll, but one of them is going to be tasked with getting the other guy set up. And that's where Paul George comes in because Paul, I think, before Kawhi's recent heater, I think Paul was doing really well while the team was figuring things out. Like Paul has ran more ISOs, haven't checked recently, but Paul was running more ISOs than anyone on the team. And doing it at a pretty high level. And a lot of that is just he's got a bag. He can be a 3-level scorer. Yeah, he's one of the few guys on the team who can pull up from 3 and catch and shoot. A guy who can get to his mid-range, get to the free throw line. I like it when he's aggressive going to the paint and if you understand what Paul's been through physically, you can understand why that doesn't happen like it did when he was in Indiana. But when Paul George gets to the paint, the entire team is better. And he understands that. And that has really helped the team. Like everyone else just has their roles. If it's a Zubac, you're setting screens, you're rolling, expect to get the ball. Like you have a point guard who will get you the ball off the screen and roll. Not that Russ was bad at that, but mind you, they didn't have that many games with Russ to begin with. And before that, the team basically acted like the point guard position didn't exist. They were like, who needs a point guard? Have Paul and Kawhi do it. Yeah, that's cool, but that can wear them down. And if those guys are unavailable, you don't have a damn point guard in your team all of a sudden. And they didn't like that. They were accepting of that when T. Lue got to be the head coach. But at this stage of what they're being asked to do, it's better to have guys like James Harden and Russell Westbrook who can take on the heavy ball handling role and let Paul and Kawhi do what they do best. Just because you can do something doesn't mean we need to see it spammed over the course of a regular season. That wears you out. They're being sustained right now because of the ball handlers that they have.
Yeah, like I look at offense as like three phases. Advantage creation, basically breaking it down when the defense is set and loaded up on you. And then advantage extending, essentially like closeout attacking, things along those lines. And then play finishing, which is the slashing off of a closeout, vertical spacing, or a guy knocking down a catch and shoot three. And essentially it used to be that Kawhi and Paul George had all of the offensive initiation piece, like that initial breaking down of the defense. And now James Harden and Russell Westbrook are actually taking a lot of that duty away and putting Kawhi Leonard and Paul George more in positions where they're still going to work, but they're going to work with an advantage and they're going to work already at their spots instead of having to work their way to their spots with a live dribble, which is just more challenging. And then I honestly think that's reflected a lot defensively, as like I think Kawhi and Paul George are having insane defensive seasons this year. And a big part of it, I loved the way you broke it down, the difference between James Harden and Dame, because one of the things the Clippers do is they basically switch everything that doesn't involve Zubac, right? And so as a result of that, like James's size is actually an advantage because when he comes off in a switch, he's going to at least provide the physical resistance to stop a guy from just bullying his way all the way to the basket, which I think has really helped. And then in general, I think having guys like Terrence Mann and Russell Westbrook to take these high leverage point of attack assignments has put Kawhi and PG in help a lot. And those dudes are devastating in help because they're such good athletes. They read the action so well. Like the defensive numbers are actually crazy. So they're fourth in defense over their last 13 games. They are now up to second in half-court defense, according to Cleaning the Glass, for the whole season. So they've been the second best half-court defense in basketball. They are with the Lakers, Nuggets, Thunder, and Celtics as the only teams that are top 10 in both half-court defense and offense. They've rebounded way better than I thought they were going to. In their last 13 games, they're up to 14th in defensive rebounding percentage, which I think is a testament to those guys just playing really hard. They're eighth best in protecting the paint. And they're pretty good at guarding the three-point line, too. Really, the only area of opportunity is their average transition defense. But other than that, they've been really good on the defensive end. What are you seeing specifically that is driving the success of the Clippers right now? I don't mean to be the
general, man, but mindset is so much a part of defense. And again, you play like we've seen each other play. Like you understand what it is. You want to win. Guys can probably score, but the team that wins is the team that is dialed in. And defense is not just physical. A lot of it is mental. A lot of it is understanding what other teams are trying to do to attack you. A lot of it is opportunity, possession battle. You mentioned the transition defense. You know what's a good way to stay out of transition defense? Take care of the damn basketball. What your offense does, getting to the free throw line, because getting to the free throw line is a huge part of sustainable defense because you're getting guys rest and more than often than not, you're making those free throws and you're setting up your half-court defense. You're keeping teams out of transition that way. If you don't turn the ball over, and this team had massive turnover issues over the first 10 games of the season, and a lot of that is play style of certain guys. A lot of it is too many ball handlers, and a lot of it is simply put, just coming into a season where guys are just not sure where they're supposed to be. And that's something that I saw the previous year when they broke camp with Paul and Kawhi, but John Wall and Reggie Jackson as the point guards. It was like, this offense is brutal to watch because guys are spraying passes all over the place and not really organized. They were trying to go small, and you're thinking small ball is great offensively. Well, small ball is not so great when you have all of your fours or fives who are masquerading in those positions, not knowing what to do. You have no interior presence. It's the wrong kind of spacing. Great. You have five guys who can line up behind the 3-point line, and you have nobody who can screen and roll. You have nobody on the offensive glass. So the team's defense, I got to give a lot of credit to Dan Craig. Dan Craig is a former Miami assistant. He came over with Tyronn Lue in 2020 to be the associate head coach. And Dan Craig is just a mad scientist when it comes to scheming and helping T. Lue adjust defensively to how they wanted to either take primary actions away or take primary scores away. They do an outstanding job there. And when Kawhi and Paul keep repeating in training camp, we're trying to be a top 5 defense. Not good. We're not trying to be good. We're not trying to be as good as we can be. Top 5. Top 5 is a specific goal. Like teachers will tell you, or guidance counselors especially will tell you, set some specific time-oriented goals. And that is a way to make sure that you achieve them. And when you say top 5, that means you are looking at what everyone else is doing and measuring it against yourself and holding yourself to a standard and being accountable for it. And that has had as much to do with how they're executing defensively than anything else. James, for all of his lackadaisical tape over the course of his career, is a veteran in the NBA for 15 NBA seasons. He is large. He is handsy. Like he gets steals every year. And this defense, the difference between this defense this year and previous years is that they have been more active in passing lanes. They are up. They are denying more. They are not letting teams just do what they want to do. They're more physical, which shows up when you see teams shoot poorly against the Clippers for portions of the game. It's because you're getting hit by them dudes. This is not a small team. Even when they don't have a Victor Zubac on, these guys are bulky. They're old. They got a lot of old man strength. Like these dudes have been in NBA weight rooms for several years. Terrence Mann's the young guy in starting lineup. Dude just turned 27. Like these dudes hit you.
He's big.
And that wears on teams over the course of a game. Now, over the course of the season, it's hard to sustain. That's what you got to see. Great. You got a damn near top 5 defense over the course of the first quarter of the season. What about the rest of the 60 games after we get through these road trips, after we've had some attrition with personnel, after teams understand what you're trying to do and they can exploit a little bit more? That's what I got to see over the course of the season.
Yeah, specifically the part you talked about playing passing lanes more. I think a big part of that has been having PG and Kawhi off ball more, just because of the fact that now with Russ, you're always with Terrence and Russ, you have a top tier athlete guarding at the point of attack, which is
start games.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's not to say that Paul George and Kawhi aren't going to be on ball. Of course they are. They had lots of really good possessions in that Kings game the other night on like Herter and Keegan Murray and stuff like that. But like the main thing that I see, because I was actually watching the Nuggets game this morning. It was one that I hadn't had a chance to watch yet. And so I went back and watched it this morning. And like one of the big reasons why Jokic missed so many shots in that game is that you can just see as, again, their back pressure that they get on Jamal Murray is a freak athlete, which is then forcing him to go down further into the lane to try to get away from that pressure. And then they got all of these athletes with Kawhi and Paul George shrinking the floor off the ball, and it's just arms everywhere. And like you could literally see Jokic changing his shot. How often do you see Jokic change his shot? He usually is just taking that same muscle memory that he's always taken. They legit had him feeling uncomfortable. And I think I have to, I know a lot of Clippers fans get on him and he kind of is the butt of a lot of jokes on Twitter, but I think Zubac is awesome. And like specifically, he's very active in his drop coverages. Like he's one of the few bigs that's like actually good at stepping up and bothering that floater in that pull-up jump shot in the mid-range while also having the ability to get back. And he's such a unique weapon because he's actually big enough to bang with Jokic a little bit and to kind of beat him off of some of his spots. And so like in a weird way, because we're going to talk about the small ball lineup here in a minute, And the small ball lineup is definitely an important part of this team's identity, but I actually really like the Zubac groups just because of how good he's been defensively in their drop coverages. Can you talk a little bit about Zubac and what he's done for this team?
He's the longest tenured player in the team. He is a guy who he was a baby when he got here from the Lakers, and they put him in the starting lineup right away. I remember Marcin Gortat was the starter, and Marcin Gortat got faded out of the league shortly after that midseason, and he has been drilled for years about positional defense. This is a dude who they trusted him switching out on Luka Doncic in playoff series, which worked for a year and then absolutely did not work as Luka downloaded that information and got better, right? So like Zoo used to be the guy that you benched and was like, this is how we're going to win the playoff series. We're going to sit Zoo. But Zoo has become an asset for this team because his positional defense is very good, very reliable. His rim protection is, it allows his team to be one of the better teams in the league at defending just your easiest shots in basketball. If he's on the floor, you know that even though he's not an explosive athlete by any means, his size, his verticality, his understanding of how guys want to score over and through him. You don't even see Zoo get dunked on, really. He's there early. He understands where to be and how to be there. And that's just, it's great coaching, but it's also a player who is coachable. It's a player who has just understood his role. Like, it's a player who's had to listen to Kawhi and Paul for 5 years straight now. Like, those dudes know good defense. Paul George was with the verticality GOAT, Roy Hibbert, you know. Kawhi was playing with Tim Duncan, a guy who annually had more blocks and fouls. That's great when your teammates, your best teammates, are guys who can teach you and get on you about defense. They hold each other accountable. Like, I mean, Zoo fouled De'Aaron Fox, I think, late in the third quarter. I want to say it was De'Aaron Tuesday night. They're up like more than 20, damn near 30. And Kawhi is still glaring at Zoo, like death staring at Zoo. That's where this team is at. That's where Zoo is at. When those guys, Kawhi and Paul, aren't there, that's Zoo. Zoo is empowered to basically tell his team that they're not doing what they're supposed to do. I can't tell you how many times Zoo just throws up his arms as if to say, where were you guys? What was supposed to happen on this rotation? And yeah, like, you know, your basic fans who do nothing but tweet behind a burner account, they're probably just going to, you know, be trolls about it. But the real ones know that Vince Zubac is not an easy player to replace, especially on the contract that he's on, because the value that you get for 25 minutes a game is not all irreplaceable. I can't tell you how many Daniel Gafford mentions I've gotten this year. It's like, you guys are playing way too much 2K or something. Clearly, y'all ain't watching the Washington Wizards. And that's not even a slight to Gaff, because Gaff is a decent player. He ain't the reason that team has won 3 games or whatever it's been this year. But it is to say what Vince Zubac can do. I have more issues with his offense, but even his offense, he's playing with James Harden. And James is a great teacher. He is drilling Zoo on where to be on pick and rolls. And let me tell you something, when you're good on offense, that allows you to be able to play more on defense. It works the other way around for a lot of guys, but it's like with Zoo, you don't need to worry about, oh, we need more spacing. We need to go smaller. I know we want to talk about the small lines. We're not seeing it as much as we used to see it because they've realized, and you know what? Getting smacked by the Nuggets in Denver was a turning point, Jason. I'll tell you that much. This team might have leaned in the small ball a little bit more, but Daniel Tice was like, we need a legitimate backup center with Mason Plumlee recovering from injury, and we need to play Zoo. Not 35 minutes because he can't handle that, but 25 to 30 minutes is good for Zoo. And because he's able to be competent on both ends of the floor, that is helping the team be a more complete team.
Yeah, Daniel Tice in particular has really helped just by being a semi-reliable above the break 3-point shooter, which has been kind of a nice touch on this team as something that you haven't seen. You know, you broke down earlier the difference between like playing 5 out and not having a guy that can screen and roll. That was super interesting that a lot of people don't understand is like you think, okay, take 5 offensive players and move them to the perimeter. Oh, there's more space, right? Actually, there's less space because on the perimeter, you're all standing closer to each other. And so you actually do need a guy who will screen and roll into the open space. Again, all the good 5-out teams in the NBA, teams like Sacramento, teams like Golden State, they are anchored, even though they run 5-out, they're anchored by a big man who screens on the perimeter and then rolls so that you can make space for those guys to drive. And that's why I'm generally, like, I know that the small ball lineup's been successful. And again, they're 252 possessions without a center, plus 11 points per 100 possessions. That's awesome. They're even rebounding well. They're getting more offensive rebounds than they're giving up. But I do think in the big picture, especially when you think about some of the teams you have to go through at the top of the Western Conference, it's good for them to have centers like Tyson and Zubac, just because those guys are, in my opinion, just a prerequisite to contend against some of the really big lineups that they're going to see. In the NBA, the game can change in an instant, but no matter how the action unfolds, DraftKings Sportsbook has your back. This week, new customers can score 150 instantly in bonus bets just for betting $5 on basketball. Win or lose, you get an instant dub. They even have great same-game parlays. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code HOOPS. That's HOOPS. New customers can get 150 instantly in bonus bets for betting just $5 on basketball, only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code HOOPS. The crown is yours. I want to talk about their offense for just a minute because, again, this has been the one disappointing thing is in this 13-game stretch, they're still just 16th in offense over that span. So I think it's safe to say, I think some of it is important to acknowledge that some of its personnel, like Terrence Mann is another guy that the league tends to close out short on, just like they do with Russ. And obviously, Zubac is not a perimeter scorer. So, like, there are opportunities for people to help, but there's still a ton of offensive skill on the floor with James Harden, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard. Norm Powell is playing really well as well. So, like, with all of that, it does feel like they're underachieving a little bit. Do you agree? And if so, what do you think they can do to improve on that end?
And that's everybody. That's everybody. Kawhi had some nasty games in that stretch before his heater. That's why the heater is we're talking brand new about him again, because we've seen Kawhi have some games where he's missed 10 out of 12 shots or whatever it is, like go a whole, his clutch time numbers were awful for a while, like awful for a long time until this month. Paul George is always good for a stinker every 10 days or so. Like that's just what happens. You can't worry about him too much because of what he does the rest of the damn week. But yeah, like every now and again, you'll look up and you'll be like, oh, Paul didn't make a basket this second quarter. It happens. James, it took him a while to act like he had permission to shoot the damn ball. It's like, what kind of system are you, James? Mm-hmm. Like they're trying to tell you to be aggressive and score the basketball. What are we doing here? And yeah, I mean, Terrence Mann is a guy who's been in the mid-high 30s percentage-wise in his career, but he was shooting like the disrespect that he was getting from these defenses to start this season, like sub 20% over the course of the first quarter of the year. And you could tell that he was still adjusting to a new role. He was adjusting to his body. He sprained his ankle really badly before the regular season started, and by the time he gets back, he's looking at James Harden on his team. Like you can probably tell. Like, and plus that dude is again being asked to guard the premier scorer on the other team as his primary assignment. Like you don't know how your energy is going to hold up, especially when you're getting into the flow of the season. So guys just need to make shots. This is a team that is a bit too gun shy about certain things, and it's not just threes. It's for a while, dudes was missing layups. Like Zoo was getting blocked by guards. Daniel Tice shows that he's a 6'8" center on the other side of 30 a little bit too often. Like he'll miss bunnies, and that's your backup center. PJ Tucker has made one shot inside the 3-point line this entire time he's been with the Clippers. He's not even in the rotation anymore. Kobe Brown, he had a dunk for the first time this season in Garbage Time Tuesday. I was like, more of that. I'm always going to celebrate dunks. Dunks is health. Dunk means you can still do it. James got his first dunk the night before. I was asking for it. I don't do it to troll dudes. It's like, nah, if you're dunking, something went very well. Either how it got there, your body's feeling good. Like like difference between laying it up and dunking. It's like always dunk. That's what I always say. And so I think that you're going to see some regression to a certain mean. And it's not a regression to the mean as far as how the league's playing or how this team's playing this season. It's a matter of these guys, we've seen them play over the course of multiple NBA seasons. We know that, hey, Russell Westbrook probably won't shoot the three as well as he did last year. We saw that. But we also know that Terrence Mann ain't going to shoot sub 20% from three. He might not reach mid 30s this year because it's been so bad to start, but he's going to approach the level of shooter that made him the high floor player that he is, that made him the valuable player that he is. So you're already seeing it. Those offensive numbers are looking better in December where they're undefeated than they were in the November portion of the year where, you can start it with James's 4-point play, but when they were in that 5-7 stretch, they lost three of those games, right? So, they didn't look very good in those three games. They've had some wins where they beat the Mavericks. They blew the Mavericks out, but that was a defensive win. Their offense looked like a second night of it back to back. They are getting better over the course of this month. So you will see those offensive numbers continue to improve.
Yeah, I think they're going to improve no matter what, just from a simple standpoint of talent. And you're right about the shot results, specifically pull-up jump shooting. There are some pull-up shooters on their team that aren't making shots as high a clip as you normally would see. I do think it's important to emphasize, too, that they are playing really hard on defense. And that's just the way it goes when you're in whenever you're playing really competitive defensive basketball, you're tired on offense, and that will affect your shot result to a certain extent. I think if I had to point to one thing that is process oriented, because again, when they are maintaining athletes like Terrence Mann and Russell Westbrook on the floor, you sacrifice your spacing a little bit. But I point to shot selection a little bit. Like one of the things that I was hoping for when James Harden came on board is this team was very much like the Suns and the Nets of old when James Harden and Kyrie were there, where it seems like they're hunting pull-up jump shots almost every single possession. And one of the things I was hoping is maybe James Harden will come in and get the defense into rotation more often so that they get more driving layups and catch and shoot threes out of that, essentially. And unfortunately, that hasn't been the case. The Clippers still lead the league in pull-up jump shot attempts per game, according to Synergy. So I do think there's a certain amount, and there's one guy I'll point to here, and dude, this drives me crazy. Paul George has a bag. Unbelievable hooper. One of the guys that I personally watch all the time and try to emulate. Just absolutely love Paul George. That dude takes so many impossible shots. His shot diet is so difficult, more so than it needs to be. And I do think that little things like that could go a long way. And I'll give you an example. Joel Embiid is a guy who's a famous playoff underachiever, right? And part of the reason for that is he doesn't actually score in the paint that much, because he relies so much on grifting and he takes so many of these 15-footers. And one of the things that I'm kind of encouraged about this year is Embiid scoring in the paint a lot more. And I think that'll be something they can lean on a little bit further when they get into the playoffs. And so I'd like to see the Clippers show a little bit more of an ability to generate quality shots that are not pull-up jump shots, because I think that'll go a long way towards helping them get to, because I think 16 is too low. This feels like an offense that should be in that 7-8 range. But if they were ever to get to that 3-4 range, I think they'd have to be a little bit more deliberate about getting the right shots. But we are running out of time, so I want to ask you one more question before we get out of here. You and I are yet to talk big picture NBA at all. And I'm just curious, what would you rank as let's just say your top 5 contenders out of the Western Conference right now?
Man, the West is so interesting right now because top 3 in the West is Minnesota, OKC, Dallas. We're talking about last year's 8th seed, a team that lost the play-in, and a team that would rather get fined than participate in a play-in. So those teams are playing great basketball, and those teams are also, for completely different reasons, thoroughly untrustworthy to sustain the pace that they've established. And, Minnesota's playing so well that you almost have to go and put them in just as a means of respect, being number 1 in the West through how many games. But just like that Pelicans team that I told you about from 2 years ago, of being last and, you got a Minnesota team. New Orleans was number 1 in the West for a portion of December. and they fell into the play-in
Yeah.
tournament, ironically, because they couldn't beat a Timberwolves team, even though Rudy Gobert was punching his own teammates. So, like, I'm gonna, Minnesota. There's always something right around the corner, but when you know that it's tied to availability of players, that's what makes you go, well, look, they're really good. And yes, if something does happen to Cat, if something does happen to Rudy, if something does happen to 17-year NBA veteran Mike Conley, yes, that team will be in trouble for however long those guys are out. I don't even care what Ant does because Ant is a constant. But Cat's health matters. Rudy's health matters. They don't have replaceable. They're not deep. It hasn't mattered. Hell, they've had Jaden out for a portion of the season already due to injury. He's back. So you know that they can sustain without him. But the things that make Minnesota go, like those guys are older or guys who've been recently banged up and they've been okay for right now. You got to put that on the list just out of means of respect. OKC, they're young, but also Shea is amazing. And so you almost got to keep them. I'm not keeping Dallas. There's no way I'm trusting a team that relies so much on Luka and relies on any version of Kyrie Irving. Again, no disrespect. Just look at the track record. You expect Dallas might slip some. Like, they're just not that good. Luka is that good. And Kyrie is a damn good number 2 when he's available. Kyrie's not available right now. So Luka's about to do a lot, and we're going to see how long it takes Kyrie to get back. Denver's a defending champs. They're in the middle of the pack. They know how to win. They got to be contenders. The Lakers, they got themselves a banner that they're going to raise. So let's just put them on there just for that, I guess. And that 5th spot is tough, man. Like, I don't really, I don't really know who I'd pick, to be honest with you. I know that the Clippers have a better record than the Suns. I cover the Clippers, but I'm not the biased type. I'm not the type to just say because I see them every time. Like, I don't do any of that stuff. I'm a wholesome content over here. So I'm going to give the Suns a trial run with the dudes that they brought together and see if they can figure it out. The Suns are the worst fourth quarter team in basketball, not just offense. They are the worst fourth quarter team in offense. They had another unserious fourth quarter against a Nets team that had a bunch of dudes who used to wear that uniform in Phoenix. They showed out. And so I want to see if Bradley Beal can get himself to play decent basketball with those other 2 guys, KD, a point guard, and Devin Booker, who you're seeing the good and bad of having Devin Booker as your point guard. Yeah, he's amazing and will put up great numbers. But you also know that he's got the ball all the time, and that's going to wear him out. And he's missed some time. And you don't have any alternatives on your roster, not even a pretend alternative. Jordan Goodwin and Saban Lee. Yeah, you basically punted the point guard situation. I'm familiar with that. I've covered a team like that. I don't think it's as good as you think it's going to be. But I'm going to put them on there because they have that top-heavy talent, and we have not really seen it come together. I saw a team that failed initially with their top heavy talent of James, Russ, Kawhi, and PG, and turned it around as those guys got more time and more information. So it's early. It's December. Those are the 5 teams that I would go with complete reservations to change this in 2 months.
Yeah, I would say that I have the Suns still as a safer bet in the big picture than the Clippers, but there's no question that the Clippers have been a more impressive team this season so far in terms of their regular season and the quality wins. Like the Suns are yet to notch a quality win. Like that's literally something they don't have in their accomplishment that yet this year. Quickly before we get out of here, are you still playing any pickup basketball?
I got a story coming out any day now about something like that, so stay tuned.
Okay, right on. Yeah, I've just coming back this week. I took a month and a half off because of this Achilles issue that I've been dealing with, which has been a huge pain. But just by getting back out and playing this week, it's been like such a breath of fresh air because when I'm not playing, I straight spiral into depression. Well, Law, I sincerely appreciate you giving us a good amount of your time today. Can you tell us where we can find your work?
The Athletic, shout out to the Athletic. We got great people on there. I'm still on all the socials and control all of them. Trying to see if Threads is popping a little bit more. So sometimes you got to take from one to give a little time to the other. This is a dead part of the season, and season tournament's over. So we got to talk about things like stealing basketballs after 60-point games. So I'm excited for the holiday season. I'm excited to continue to learn more about the league that we're covering, and that's it. Like, I'm looking forward to, getting through this month, and I'm sure the conversations will change in January, since that's when the trade winds will really blow.
Hell yeah, man. And we'll try to get you on again before the end of the season. And I definitely want to see you in Vegas in July, and maybe before then if we're lucky for a hoop session. I appreciate your time. Thank you, all of you guys, for supporting the show. We will be back tomorrow with an old-fashioned film session. I'll see you guys then.